Hey guys. Okay, before we start this podcast, I need to say something. The audio on my end does not sound great. There was a terrible, terrible echo. I'm, pretty new to this, so I didn't really know what was going on. Seems like there was some sort of echo, like from a studio, something like that. So I just spent the last few hours going through and manually adjusting all of that audio so that it's listenable. Thankfully, you can hear my guests fantastic. They're loud and clear. My audio, not so great, but this is such an important conversation and such an educational episode that if you can make it through my audio, I just really hope you do. I really hope you give it a listen. This episode in particular is very much worth the listen. And for anybody that makes it to the end, thank you so much. I feel horrible. I feel horrible for the listeners. I feel horrible for the guests because these guys are phenomenal. I am so, so lucky to have been able to get them on the podcast. And they gave us so much insight, so much education. But I'm going to stop rambling. Moral of the story, there was an echo. It makes my audio sound really messed up, but you'll get the gist. Their audio is great. They do the majority of the talking, and they're really the ones that you have to be listening to. So thank you, and enjoy the episode.
Oh, we're the horrible people, don't you understand? Painted with broad strokes by a clueless hand. Misunderstood, misquoted, and left in the dark. Always.
Thank you so much for tuning into Horrible People podcast. My name is Jenn McDonald. The two horrible people we have on today are Sean and Oscar. Sean and Oscar are with Saltlick Worldwide. I was on their podcast a couple of weeks ago, so if you guys haven't checked it out yet, definitely have to. Guys, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what Saltlick Worldwide is?
Yeah. So once again, thanks for having us on. Like you said, we had a great time with you a couple of weeks ago. That was a really interesting conversation. I almost got us banned on YouTube, by the way. Shadow banned a little bit for sure. Oh, just wait till you hear the rest of this story. It got worse this week. But yeah, we're so Saltlick Worldwide. We actually started off as outfitters in Kentucky. This was kind of a dream that a couple of us had. We loved hunting so much that we wanted to really kind of make a go at doing it for a living. But unfortunately, we realized after a couple of years that there's really not a bunch of money to be made in the outfitting side of the business, and it really takes so much of your time. So we kind of pivoted over to the social media side, and we decided, essentially what it boiled down to is we got to the point with outfitting that we didn't enjoy hunting anymore because we were spending so much time with other people that we were losing our joy of it. So it was a pretty easy decision to make. And it was also kind of easy to pivot over to more of the social media aspect in that, hey, we really love doing this. So let's share it with the world. Instead of selling hunts and taking people hunting, let's bring our experiences that we love to everybody else. And especially from us, we take a more international approach to it. So while occasionally you may see a deer hunt, a whitetail deer hunt in some of our content, it's very few and far between. Most of the things you're going to see coming out of us are very exotic. And that's just kind of where our niche is hit. And frankly, we just love traveling and we love hunting around the world. And we love bringing stories about not only the hunting, but the culture and the conservation efforts that are going on worldwide to folks back home.
I love that. Okay. Yeah, that's really good. So what made you guys decide to start the podcast? Just sort of more outreach or education?
It's an easy platform to get people involved in the conversation. For whatever reason, there's a I don't want to say a majority, but there's definitely a demographic that responds more to the podcast type of content and the short form content than the long form content that we produce. So, and to be frank, we actually enjoy doing it because we get to speak our mind. And kind of like we talked about before on your podcast, we don't have any sponsors, and that's done on purpose because we don't want anybody dictating what we can say and what we can't. So we can literally, except YouTube has something to say about it. But aside from YouTube, we can say whatever we want, whenever we want. We can have whatever guest on. We can talk about as much controversy as you want to. And frankly, that's what people want to listen to. The dialed down. And listen, hunting's a fantastic sport, and we love it, even international hunting. But there's only so much, that that feel good kind of content that you can produce before it's washed out and everybody's doing it and you've seen it before. So I want to get down into the nitty gritty of the stuff that's controversial and that'll come up and bite you in the ass. That's what I want to go after.
Fair enough. And speaking of that, what happened with YouTube? Like, what was the deal with YouTube?
Yeah, so it started with your podcast that we did. So I got 4 infractions from the podcast. I've got 2 for election advertising. One was based out of the EU for whatever reason. I don't know. Is Canada part of the EU? I don't think they would be. They're not Europe, but
I don't know.
So there's some kind of right. And then I've got the same one for election advertising in the United States, because we mentioned, and now I've been back and forth and I had to write out long forms and send it back in and actually request a manual review. And we mentioned Biden. It came up exactly one time and they flagged it because we mentioned Biden. I can't even find it in the video, like scrubbing back through where somebody said Biden or.
I don't remember that.
No, I don't either. So they hit us for that. And then also it was shocking content, which if you go through and look at what shocking content is, it certainly doesn't apply to a podcast, and I didn't even put any B-roll in the podcast. So it was crazy. And then they also cited talking firearms. That was the other one, talking about firearms. However, is in the description in YouTube, in the policy, if you read the policy, we didn't show a firearm. We talked about firearms in policy, but we never showed anything. So the algorithm, right? So it's this computer there that decides whether or not they're going to push out your content. So on your video alone, we got whacked 4 times. And I'm like, so I've spent the better part of 2 weeks going back and forth with Google and trying to get somebody, a real person, say, listen, guys, come on. When our videos, normally get, 20, 30,000 views within the first couple of weeks. And I think yours got like 68. It's because if you didn't physically click on the link that we posted on Facebook, you can't find it. Like if you search for it, you can't find the video. And then it happened a second time with our next guest, because we talked about, and that guest was Mike Murray.
Yeah.
And we talked about offshore fishing and NOAA and regulations, Florida Wildlife Conservation Commission regulations. And once again, we mentioned same kind of tags that we got on yours. It was so we had election advertising, and that was because we mentioned Trump when we were talking about that proposed legislation, Bill 55, to limit offshore fishing. And we talked about the fact that Trump Jr. is so involved and such a conservationist that we think that's going to be really helpful from that perspective, because a lot of that stupid legislation is probably going to get pushed out now. And that was the extent of it. And once again, it was shocking content and on and on and on. It was literally a podcast about shark depredation and red snapper regulations off the coast of Florida. So 2 in a row. And like, how is this possible, people? Like,
that's crazy.
And that's not even like some of our podcasts before, way worse than that. Like that, we were way dialed down.
Correct.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the episode that I did with you guys wasn't crazy. I mean, we talked about Canadian politics a little bit, but nothing too controversial, I don't think. It's wild.
No, and to me, it's educational content. I mean, we were trying to learn. We're coming at that your podcast we're coming at it from an American perspective, where we don't understand your politics and your regulations. So we were trying to learn. So for us, it's an informative thing. And I know our listeners and our viewers, they'd be interested in that, because they're probably, just like we are. They don't know what's going on in Canada, our closest neighbor,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the gist of it. And I figured, man, this thing is going to do great, because it was fun too. Like we had, it was a good time. And there's a lot of stuff that came up, and and the shorts did great too.
Yeah.
Like on Facebook and stuff like that. Some of them blew up, and it was really good. Like when you're talking about, what was Pierre,
Pollyanna.
Yeah. Now I love that guy, by the way. I've Googled all his stuff.
The Apple.
The best.
Yeah, that I cut that into one of the shorts too. That was perfect.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm surprised you guys didn't get flagged for like any Canadian politics, Canadian election. It was all EU and American. That's weird.
Yeah, it was, and that's what I expected, to have not necessarily a copyright strike, but something that would restrict it to a certain market, because that's what YouTube does. They'll say, okay, this is offensive in a certain market, so we're not going to push it out there. Well, unfortunately, like they literally, unless you have the direct link, you can't find that video right now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's just it, and we've never had it happen before. Now I've had some copyright strikes before for using licensed music, right, from like audio or one of the other sources that I have a subscription for, and they'll hit me with a copyright strike. Then I have to send them in the user license agreement, and then they'll take it off several weeks later, kind of thing. But I've never had a video just outright just shut down where nobody can find it. It's crazy.
That's insane.
We're becoming really YouTube.
Yeah, is that what? Yeah,
I think that's
listen, watch Joe Rogan or any of those guys, right? And you, comparatively speaking, we're dialed down. Like we're nothing compared to those guys. I guarantee you can find his video.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, they get into conspiracy theories, they get into everything. That is so weird. Well, I'm going to share that link in the show notes here so people can click it and watch it and try and show YouTube if people actually want to watch it and it's not anything nefarious.
Yeah, I mean, it was to me, it was such good content. Like we felt so good about it. Like when we were done, like, cause it was one of those things where we actually learned something too. I mean, you really helped educated us. Well, I had no idea that that kind of stuff was going on. So, when you and I kind of, connected and we set up the podcast, like I was super stoked about it. And Paul was too. And unfortunately I have to apologize for Paul. He really wanted to be here. I kind of dropped the ball and told him too late, and his kids are on spring break right now. So they're actually traveling with his kids. So, but Paul said hi, but he was looking forward to it. So he couldn't make it.
Well, thanks anyways. Maybe next time we'll try and get him on. So speaking of educating, trophy hunting. We're here to talk about trophy hunting. I obviously know a lot of hunters, and so many of them say, I'm okay with hunting, but I'm not okay with hunting. I don't think they understand exactly what trophy hunting is. So can you guys kind of dive into a little bit as to what trophy hunting actually is? I think, like you said earlier, the name trophy hunting is almost misleading. It almost makes it seem like some sort of demonized sport that people are doing, where they're just, cutting the head off the animal, leaving everything running.
Yeah, and so I don't know where the term trophy hunting came from. I would say the vast majority of hunters are not trophy hunters in that sense. It's a huge misconception, I think, in the community, and frankly, to me, it's a lazy oversimplification of a term, right? And it's been twisted by the media and activists, and it paints this bloodlust and ego of these hunters. And for most of us anyway, it's not about pulling the trigger, right? There's a much deeper connection to the land, to the animal, to the culture, to the preparation. For us, it's the challenge going into the preparation, and that connection between land, human, animal bond. That makes that hunt. The problem is, it's shown trophy hunters have, for whatever reason, like I said, with this term, people just think that we're out there squeezing the trigger. We're going to kill an animal. We're going to go lop its head off. We're going to put it on the wall, and that's it. The meat goes to waste. Everything goes to waste. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Now, unfortunately, there are people that do that. There absolutely are. And it's a very, very small percentage of the hunting community that are that way. I would say that, high 90%, 95 to 98% of hunters aren't trophy hunters. They are in the sense that they enjoy it, and they're certainly looking for what they consider a trophy caliber type animal, which we'll get into that later. Why I think that term it can be expounded upon, because it's not exactly cut and dry when people talk about trophy. But like I said, for us, it's not we're not killing for fun, right? It's about ethical and sustainable hunting practices for us. And I think it's often overlooked. And like I said, the term in general just is horrible. I hate the term in general.
Now, is there another term that people should be using, or for trophy hunting, like genuinely what called?
Well, I literally just call it hunting. Like I tell people, I'm a hunter. That's it. And some people say I'm a big game hunter, or I'm a dangerous game hunter, or whatever. But I mean, hunters are hunters for the most part. And until you get into that, and I know that's coming up too. We'll probably talk about that too. When you get into poaching, obviously, then you've crossed the line at that point in time, and those are not hunters. That's something totally different. But yeah, it's just weird. Like, I don't understand. Like, to me, it's just, I am a hunter. I'm not a trophy hunter,
So to put everyone's minds at ease, what happens to the meat? Like, what happens to the animal after it's harvested? I'm sure it depends on the species. Like I saw picture on your Facebook of a baboon, I believe, that you had harvested. Very, very amazing picture. Love that. That looks like a magnificent animal.
Yeah, and they're difficult to hunt too. I've been years and years and years trying to, before I was actually successful in a baboon hunt. They're sketchy critters. They're hard. They're super smart. But they're also, people ask me all the time, well, how can you shoot a baboon, or how can you shoot a monkey? I'm like, well, you have to understand that to the people in Africa, baboons and monkeys are very much like feral hogs to us.
Yep.
They just destroy everything. I mean, they will literally break windows. They're super destructive. Crop farmers hate them. They'll go in and just obliterate crops of all kind, and they just cause a tremendous amount of damage. So especially in Africa, landowners are happy to come in and take as many off as you possibly can. Just like, people in Texas and South Florida, you farmers, please take every single hog that you possibly can, get them out of here as quick as you can. Cause they're, and they're just ravenous, and they damage the land, and they damage structures and everything else. So those kinds of animals, I don't know if there's from an eating perspective, I've not eaten baboon, or monkey. I know that people do.
Yep.
And it's a thing, but going back to the question about what's done with the meat, I'll break it down into two categories. So if we're hunting in the United States, for example, I would say 100% of what we've hunted and harvested, it absolutely ends up in our freezers.
Yeah.
With the exception of a small, there'll be a little pile of, whether it's, some guts and bone and stuff like that you can't use, but we process every single animal that we're going to shoot. And in fact, we're not going to, our plan is to, first is to feed our families. And then secondly, it's the trophy. So if we're not going to, I'll put it this way, we're not going to squeeze the trigger unless that animal is going to go to feed our families or somebody else's family, period.
Okay.
Likewise, in countries like South Africa, for example, it is anal as we are about the use of meat. They're 10 times worse. You want to talk about a country where absolutely nothing goes to waste? You go to South Africa and, we'll harvest a 200 pound, 230 pound whitetail in, say, Kentucky, for example,
Yep.
And there may be, 30 or 40 pounds of guts and bones left over after the fact. You go shoot a 600 pound kudu in South Africa and there may be 5 pounds left over. They utilize everything.
Yeah.
And from the safari perspective, what a lot of people don't understand is the outfitters themselves, they will retain all the prime cuts in camp for their clients. So when you're actually in camp, you are eating what you've harvested or what the previous group has harvested. And then there's a secondary market in South Africa too for it. So unlike us here, we can't harvest an elk or a mule deer and then go buy it at a Publix or a Kroger's or anything like that. It just doesn't exist. USDA has said, no, that's not going to happen.
In here. Yeah.
Right. But in South Africa, that's very much a thing. So the abattoir comes in, immediately following. And what it does too, it's really unique there because it keeps the prices low. Because it's not just the hunter that's paying for the animal. There's a secondary value associated with the meat from that animal. And then a lot of and in fact, I'm going to go as far to say 99% of the outfitters, they all support at least a school or a village or an orphanage. So, we call it ground meat here. They call it mince meat there. So they mince a lot of meat, and it's really especially for a lot of these orphanages, that's like their number one source of protein that they're going to get. And it's coming from these outfitters. So these outfitters, and they don't get any, there's no pomp and circumstance around it. They just, when they have a bunch of it processed, they go and deliver it, and nobody's making Facebook posts about that, right? Doing that's just part of their everyday life. And it's not just them in that country. The local farmers do it too. These free range farmers that have to cull certain animals back because they're overgrazing their land. So they have to cull native wildlife. Well, the arbiter comes in and a certain portion of that will go to the orphanages or the local villages. So it's very cyclical there. And it's really the idea of letting something, especially in countries like that, go to waste is unheard of. Like every bit of it gets used for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's more people to know because it's really the safari hunt where people say like, they're shooting them, leaving them to waste. Like it's going to feed communities, like feed people in need.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't want to, I don't want to go out on a limb and say that every bit of it goes to the community because that is not true. There is a secondary market for it, but that's what helps keep the outfitters' prices, reasonable so people can go to hunt. but a lot of it does go to those outreach programs. Now, especially when you get north into more Central Africa, when you get to Botswana, you get to Mozambique, Namibia, Zimbabwe, places like that, like 100% of that goes to local communities, because they, you harvest a big animal, the village itself is coming in and processing it, and then, they're, like I said, they'll take some prime cuts for camp, but there's no secondary meat market there because you're just so far away from everything. So literally, the villages get like 99% of the time they get 100% of the meat. Like nothing goes to waste there.
So other than what you harvest, prime cuts, the outfitter, you're not really taking anything home, right?
No, and that's the unfortunate part. We'd love to do that, but it's prohibited. So not only USDA says no, right? So that's a big thing for us. We can't bring anything in. But likewise, South Africa also won't allow the export of those meats, even to countries that are open to trade of that meat. South Africa. Yeah, so it has to stay in country, right? So it's one of those weird things, you can't bring it back. Now, unlike Canada, if I go harvest something in Canada, I can bring it back. Mm-hmm. And I think Mexico's the same way. If I go down and hunt a muley, I think I can bring the meat back there.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and I know we've brought, I think Guatemala, I think we bring fish back from Guatemala, and we're able to do it from the Bahamas. So there are countries that participate and allow, and that's okay to do. But for the most part, especially when you get to the African continent, it just doesn't happen anymore. You're not allowed to do it at all. But still doesn't go to waste. You just can't bring it home. And that's unfortunate because it's so good.
I bet I would love to try that, and I would have to do it. It's just like stay with the outfitter, eat what you can while you're there.
Yeah, and when you do that, right, you got to have an open mind, right, Oscar? Because there's some stuff that comes out, you're like, what is this? Like zebra or porcupine. We had porcupine once.
Porcupine, yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, but I've
sure.
Yeah, like really. And then, but my take is on it is, if you're there, just go ahead and do it. Try it, right? If you don't like it, you don't like it. But I don't want to kick myself in the butt later on in life because I had an opportunity and didn't try something.
You have to try it, absolutely. So, what are some odd, wild games you guys have tried?
And like I said,
like in life or like recently.
Go ahead, Oscar. I'll let you tackle this one, buddy.
I've eaten. Let's see. I've had turtle.
Oh wow!
Yep.
That's
that would be so interesting
for us here, though.
Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking more that further south, Oscar. Further south.
I've eaten like rattlesnake and all kinds of stuff like that.
I've heard snake is really good. Is it like hyped up?
It tastes kind of like fish. It's kind of weird.
Oh wow, that's great.
Tastes like
not like chicken.
No, not like chicken.
And you guys have both tried giraffe. What would you guys compare that to?
It's actually pretty lean. It was weird. It
was weird. It tastes kind of like goat.
Oh,
like have you ever had like goat meat or something?
Yeah.
To me, it tasted like goat.
Yeah, and then I tell you the most surprising thing, and because people think of them as horses, is zebra. Zebra is so good.
The greatest meat of all time.
Yeah, I honestly, and people are going to say, "Oh, these guys are crazy. They're nuts." Go over there and try zebra, especially a fillet, and you'll throw that ribeye away and ask for zebra every time, kind of thing. If it was available, it's that good.
Yeah, you can buy zebra in the States on there. I think it's for $200 a pound.
That is insane. I mean, I get it. I'm sure it's hard to obtain, but now I've tried horse, and horse is amazing. Like, I'm a horse lover, but you know what? I ate it. Have you guys tried horse? Do you think zebra is comparable to horse?
I've not tried horse.
I've never tried horse. I know in France it's a big thing to eat horse.
And I think
everything.
I might have had donkey once that accidentally.
I've eaten like alpaca.
That's wild.
Frogs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here we do
frogs, iguanas.
Frogs, iguanas, gators. Yeah, I mean, because we live in South Florida and we're in a subtropic environment, we have access to all that kind of stuff. So, but like, yeah, I don't know. Zebra is probably out there for me. I'm a porcupine. I've had caracal, which is very much looks like a bobcat here in the States.
I've eaten bobcat.
See, and I feel like this is a species that a lot of people take a picture of, and they're like, there's no way people are eating those. So it's good to know that people are eating those, especially the communities.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier about farmers culling like overpopulated species. Do you think trophy hunting, or I guess trophying or safari hunting, damages the species? Like, do you think it puts the species at risk for the population?
Well, I'll give you two different examples. So I think South Africa is the perfect example of how the conservation model that they use works. So, if you look at 30 years ago, I think there was, and I'm going to get this number wrong, they were down to something like a couple of hundred black wildebeest.
Yep.
And now there's several million, and it's because of the hunting industry. And everything's on the rise. There are more rhino now, black rhino especially, than there have been in the past 300 years kind of thing. And it's because of these conservation programs, and it's because of hunters. And frankly, without hunters, the money that we spend, the farmers wouldn't have the money. There's a saying that they have in South Africa that Hannes likes to use, and it's called, he says, if it pays, it stays. So essentially, if that animal has an intrinsic value and it's worth something, then it's worth conserving and growing it. And there is a value to all of those animals there. And because of that, South Africa is a huge success story. Whereas however, and I know we're going to get to this later, some countries that have banned hunting, I can show you several examples of how that is detrimental to a species. Yeah, or very large groups of species too. It's just horrible. So no, I mean, trophy hunting, it's done the exact opposite. Even here in the States, and I'll say hunting. I'm going to stop saying trophy hunting.
Yeah.
And hunting in general, we spend, I don't know, I've got 4 or 5 different licenses in the states for each state, and they're anywhere between $500 and $1,000 for an out-of-state license kind of thing, and those monies go into funding conservation programs and funding, game wardens and things like that, which are necessary. Likewise in South Africa, those monies go back into conservation, and they can form anti-poaching units and stuff like that. So the money really generated from hunting really sticks with it. And we'll talk about it later, and I think we might have mentioned it before, but it's the Pittman-Robertson Act. Yeah. Pittman-Robertson Act, and that'll come up later, but I'll really dive into that a little bit because that's something unique that the states did back in 1937, I believe the date was, and it's a really cool program that just people don't know about.
So is there a strategy behind what sort of animals you guys harvest from this species?
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the problems I think people often misunderstand, is that they think we're after the biggest of the biggest male of that species. And that's not true. What we look for is, and while yes, there are some people that absolutely do that, they only want a 200-inch plus whitetail, even if he's only 3 years old. We don't hunt that way. I want to take the most mature animal out of the herd, an animal that's past his prime, that's genetics are already back into that ecosystem. He's already been there for several years, and it's time for those up and comers to get their chance. So I'm not looking for the biggest animal. I want the oldest, most mature animal to take out of the herd, or something that's injured also.
Yeah.
Something that's not going to make it. And that's what we look at. And then, even from people, they'll talk about, we'll go out specifically to hunt white-tailed deer and do some, we call it doe calling, but we have to do that to maintain the population. There's a certain number, like for example, on my farm in Kentucky, there's a certain number that I need to take off every year to keep that line in balance in order to have a good buck to doe ratio. And if you don't, it's going to blow up, and then all of a sudden you're not going to have any bucks because you've got so many does, and they're going to push they're very social creatures, but whitetail bucks don't want anything to do with a female unless it's rut. Right. So you very seldom, you see a lot of bachelor groups of bucks on a trail cam. Unless it's rut, you very seldomly see a buck with a doe.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, the older animals, the injured animals, they're not reproducing the same. They're old. They're not going to die a beautiful death in the wild. Nice, quick harvest is the ideal way to go, I think.
Yeah, because their choices are either starving to death or getting eaten alive.
Right. Yeah.
Usually.
And frankly, by that time too, that's the thing. The animals already contributed to the gene pool, like we talked about, and removing them has little to no impact on the population's future. Yep. In fact, I'd say it does the other, because now there's one less mouth to feed. So that means, there's more browse available for those animals to flourish. And there, and like in the States too, there, in some places, there are minimum age or size requirements that governments and or outfitters in general will set aside. There's a lot of outfitters in the States that say, hey, listen, this is a 140 minimum. He's got to have 5 points on both sides, because it's not about shooting the biggest, it's advancing that age class to get the most mature animal you can. And then at the end of the day, it's about making ethical and informed decisions that align with your individual conservation goals.
Yeah, fair enough. And I assume the safari hunting is the same. I mean, I assume the outfitters go and, I'm sure they're educated enough to say which animal needs to be harvested, right?
Yeah, and so that's the thing. Africa's on another level, right? So they run on super strict quotas there. So, an outfitter will say, for example, I'll use an impala, which is a very typical species there. He may have, let's say he needs to take 100 this year off the property. Well, of that 60 may be male, and then the 40 may be female, but they stick to those quotas, and it really makes a difference. They understand you're also not going to shoot, it's certainly frowned upon those. And I don't know how the PHs do it because they're fantastic at aging and sexing those animals, but they're really, really good. So ultimately at the end of the day, even with them, it's about taking out the oldest, most mature animal in the herd. And it's not necessarily the one that's going to score the best either. That's the thing. That animal that scores the best may only be 4 years old. Well, the animal that needs to be taken out may be 8 years old. And while he's not quite as tall and may not measure as big, he's certainly a representation of the species, and he's the right animal to take out. That's a big difference between a hunter and a trophy hunter. A trophy hunter doesn't care about the age of the animal. They're counting inches. That's all they're looking for. They're chasing a number.
Yeah, fair enough. And I mean, even that, I'm assuming that animal still doesn't go to waste, it's feeding the community and the economy too. I mean, I'm sure it's a huge part of their economy.
It is. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a big portion of their GDP. Tourism in general. But I think so they call it. It's not safari, but it's they group ecotourism and the hunting into the kind of the same group. But it's really skewed. It's like 78% of the revenue for ecotourism comes from hunting, and the 26% that's left over, the 16% that's left over comes from ecotourism, like photographic safaris and stuff.
Wow. Okay. So yeah,
it always just makes more sense, just math. If you're going to go to a national park over there, let's say it costs you, the tour is $6,000, let's say, on there. But if you're hunting, you go to go hunt, one animal might be $6,000. And if you stack 3 or 4 animals on there, not including, what it costs to stay at the lodge and the day fees and like that on there, just the cost of the animal on there, you've spent $6,000-$7,000 just to hunt, the animals and everything, not including everything else. What somebody's just oh, we went to Africa to see all the parks and we spent $5,000. I'm just okay, well, I spent 3x that. Yeah. So it's kind of that's the difference that I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's certainly lopsided, but it's a good thing too. I mean, when you say trophy hunting, and especially places like Africa, there's real economic value, right? You can quantify it, and it brings value to rural communities too. It creates jobs. Yep. You've got trackers, PHs, cooks, anti-poaching staff. And a portion of those hunting fees goes right back into schools, clinics, infrastructure. And that income gives people a reason to protect the wildlife rather than turn to poaching or land uses that destroy habitat. Yeah. If it pays, it stays.
Now, are you both aware of what kind of poaching we would generally see in South Africa?
Excuse me. Yeah. So South Africa, the big poaching that's going on in South Africa right now is really surrounded around the rhino. That's a big thing because rhino horn is such a lucrative market. It's such a black market thing. So there's a lot of money spent on anti-poaching in South Africa to protect rhino. Now, when you get into northern countries, it's not only rhino, but it's elephant, it's kudu, it's buffalo. There's also, there's wood poaching. So they actually, people will go in and cut trees down to use to build houses or firewood or to sell on the side of the road kind of thing. So it's not just about animals. They'll actually, go on the private land or land that they don't own. And, not only will they kill animals, but they'll also, rob it of its, anything it's got a value there too.
Absolutely. No, that's good to know. I didn't even think about wood poaching. I mean, that's a huge part of the animal's habitat.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. And so and most people don't think of that either, but yeah, there's a lot that goes on. And then, like I said, from the rhino side too, I mean, there's millions and millions of dollars that goes into protecting these animals. And we had a guest on, Randy Vestrot, and Randy is super passionate about rhinos and loves his rhinos. And they're so expensive to keep and maintain because they require 24-hour supervision, and that they have to be protected 24 hours a day. Yeah. So it's not a game that you want to get into. Like you have to be willing to spend a lot of money and know that it's going to take a lot of money to continue to grow those animals.
So I guess you can really, really see what hunters contribute to that. I mean, they need the money to fund that.
Oh yeah, without hunters, I mean, literally, like, so we'll use South Africa again, for example. If it wasn't for hunting in South Africa, the farmers would tear down all the high fences and go back to raising cattle and sheep because it's more economical. There's more money to be made there.
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah. The hunting kind of either balances that out, trumps it almost.
Right. And to kind of key off of that a little bit too. So part of conservation is not only the animal, but it's also conserving the land.
Yep.
And that's something important. So yes, while you're conserving the animal, you're also conserving that land and that habitat that they live on and that they thrive on. And if it's not for those animals, then that land is subject to development. It could be turned into farmland or housing developments or something. So after a while, you've taken all their native habitat. So even if you do have a few here and there, you're not going to have the population numbers that you should, because you've now taken all the land. And there's I think there's you and I talked about there's a proposition or something that was going through in your government too. It was
30 by 30. Yeah, 30 by 30 feet.
Yeah, to set aside land that can't be developed. And while I don't like the idea the way they're doing it, and that they want to make it totally off limits unless you're native, maybe is what you told us. I don't agree with that, because I think there's a better use for it. I do appreciate the fact that they are setting land aside that can't be developed. I think that's a very good thing.
100%. I mean, 30 by 30 is a global initiative. I think it's a good thing if it's approached properly. I mean, hunting isn't something that should be restricted from this land, in my opinion, but we'll see. Hopefully we have a cheap government that'll have a different ideas how to approach 30 by 30. So what kind of misconceptions have you two heard about trophy hunting, which I hate calling it that now because it seems like it's just stigmatized term?
Yeah, I mean, I hate the fact that all hunters,
are lumped.
Yeah, we're all lumped into that same group. I think that's if one thing pisses me off about it, that would be it. That it's lumping us into a category that we're not in. Oscar and I certainly aren't. Actually, none of us are. I don't know. There are some people that are out there just to kill the biggest of a species and will fly in just to do one, pull a trigger one time, and they don't care about what happens to the animal. But 99% of us aren't like that. We actually care. So to get lumped in, and it's like that, it's the one guy on social media, right? You can be doing everything right, and one asshole goes out there and shoots an animal, and then he takes a stupid picture with it, or then all of a sudden, all of us get lumped into that category that we're just bloodthirsty trophy hunters, and we don't give a shit. And it's horrible. But the people that are doing that right, we pay the price for the negligence of a small majority or minority at that point in time.
And it seems to be like that with everything. I mean, people focus on the 1%. The evil 1% is what seems to just blow up media, and it's just so easy for them to take that one bad video, that one bad picture, that one bad example, and blanket that across everyone.
Yeah, well, and Jenny brought that up to me. I don't know if she shared the reel, but there was a pretty large female, I'll call her influencer, that got in deep trouble. She's a waterfowl hunter. They were shooting waterfowl and picking. I think they were duck hunting, and she took a video. The duck wasn't actually dead when she picked it up; it was still alive, and she decided to film it flopping around in the boat and she put her hand, like next to it. And while its feet were flapping, so like it's clapping her hand like that. I'm like, that's the most disrespectful freaking thing.
My head.
And then you post that on social media. It's bad enough. The ethical thing to do is to dispatch that animal right that second as soon as you figured out it was still alive. Okay, so it's suffering. But then to go make a video about that stuff and then have it on social media, like you painted a giant bullseye on yourself. Like and she's done forever now. There's no coming back from that. She is absolutely going to be labeled for the rest of her life for one stupid decision. And that's the part that hunters need to understand. Like, it doesn't just make them look bad. Now everybody's waterfowl hunters, you guys are all that way, or you're doing the same thing she's doing, and you don't care about the animal, and you're just and that's what, the leftists, right? The tree huggers, the greenies, they're always going to come back to that and point to that. Well, she just did it and she's got, 10 million followers on Instagram and so all of y'all are doing it. No, we're not doing it. But frankly, we found out about it because there was a group that actually called her out on it. A group of waterfowl hunters that said, hey, listen, this is horrible for the sport and the industry. And they called her out on it. And there's been lawsuits threatened and stuff after it. But, yeah, it's crazy. You can, do everything right your entire life and you make one bad mistake, but it affects everything.
That is extremely damaging to the industry and the hunting community because, like you said, people are going to see that and they're going to think all act that way, it couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, we all want a quick kill, painless, we respect the animal.
Yeah, and listen, hunting's not always pretty, right? We all strive to make that ethical first shot, one kill, animals goes down right then and there. The reality is that doesn't always happen that way, right? But you don't have to showcase it on social media and make a mockery out of it though, right? The ethical thing to do is, when I'm hunting with people and I encourage them, if the animal doesn't go down immediately, rack another round and send it, especially if it's a first shot hit, and get it down on the ground quickly and ethically. But, when you can obviously, like going back to the duck thing, it's still alive. They put it in the boat. They know it's still alive. And then they took the time. Yeah, it's like, what person in the world, if I come, we go to recover a whitetail deer or something, and it's happened before where the deer is still alive when we walk up on it, give me 30 seconds and it will not be. I am putting that animal out of its misery. I hate to see an animal suffer. And it makes me feel horrible inside. When you're able to harvest an animal and it goes down instantly and it expires instantly, I don't want to say it's a good feeling, but it's almost like a relief, right? Because, it went fast, and then be thankful for the animal too, show it some respect, so I think if more people did that or showed that, and that's the thing, most people don't show that to other people. So they're only seeing the bad stuff on social media, not the good stuff that hunters do and hunters contribute to the industry.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that it's the bad stuff that blows up, the bad stuff that gets pushed out there. And I know this is so laughable to people that are anti-hunting or don't understand hunting, but hunters do really respect and love the animals that they're hunting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's farmers, and I go back to Kentucky, and think about how much time and money and energy we spend on developing the land and setting aside certain areas, and I'll specifically overlog an area to make it super thick to let it grow back up. And I have sanctuaries on the farm that we never go. It's all deer all the time, no matter what. And then we're planting food plots, and we're doing selective harvest on different tree species to improve the ecology of the farm, to make it more habitable and to sustain higher numbers of, it's not only deer, but if you're managing your property right, you're going to have pheasant, you're going to have grouse, you're going to have rabbits, you're going to have turkeys. So those land improvements that you're making, it's not just one species, it's everything, from snakes all the way up, it's everything is going to, it's going to be better for every species there when you do that.
I think it's the one thing that people don't understand is how can you care. And sure, like I love seeing deer. Like I love seeing them.
Yeah.
How can you truly care and love this animal and then still want to shoot one on there, kind of thing? And I'm always like, I'm just like, you don't understand me as a hunter. I know that deer better than you do.
Mm-hmm.
On there. Like I can tell you exactly where he's at. I can tell you how old he is. I can tell you on there exactly what he needs and all this stuff. Like I care about that. And if there was like a limited amount, like I know how many to take, how many not to take, and that kind of stuff. And I people never kind of like understand that kind of like aspect of it, of just like, You know, like, do you think that I want to be out here like planting food plots and,
Yeah. Getting eaten alive by bugs.
you know, potentially get something in November?
Well, and that's the thing. You know, we're doing this year round, right?
Yep.
So it's 12 months of the year. We're focusing on, you know, the habitat and keeping. And listen, if it's a hard winter, we feed all the way through the winter too to make sure those animals will make it through the winter. Or if it's a harsh spring, same thing. You know, so for us, and it's a thing, we're raising entire populations of not only deer but all these other species of animal, and they're all thriving. And we're taking a select few here and there.
Yeah.
You know, the vast majority stay there. And I think, and unfortunately, you know, in the old days, the problem is we've interfered. So we've interrupted the normal migratory patterns of these animals. They don't migrate like they used to. And because we've interfered, it's our job to conserve the animals now. And there's no better person to do that than a hunter, period. We're to me, the best conservationists out there. And I don't mean to throw shade at like biologists and people like that, because they do have a purpose too, but there's nobody that conserves and loves the land and the animal more than the hunter does. Now, trophy hunter, he doesn't give a shit about it, right? He's out there for one purpose and one purpose only. Hunters like us, they care and we care. And, you know, if we can get that story out there, you know, and tell more people and show more people that, hey, and you're a hunter, you've done it, right? So you whitetail hunt and you love to turkey hunt, right? Yeah. And it's not about I have a feeling you don't go out and say, oh, I'm only going to kill that 12.200-inch buck if he walks out kind of thing. That's not, and, you know,
No, exactly.
It's about, and there's a lot of people that are just, they hunt for meat. Period. That's all they are.
100%.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that would rather just go ahead and shoot a couple does a year to put in the freezer to feed their family, and they don't care about horns. You know, with turkey, people chase beard length, but others just enjoy it, enjoy the thrill of it, and love the taste of turkey. So we want to go out and shoot a couple turkey a year.
Oh, I saw a giant.
It's turkey season in Florida, so they're getting after it right now. Lots of osceolas on the ground.
A 10-inch beard today.
Yeah. Ooh,
yeah.
Ground dragger.
This thing was dragging.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You know, ours open a month and I'm so excited. I can't wait. But yeah, I mean, I'm not even looking for like a giant beard or the giant spurs. I'm looking for something that's mature. Like you can tell if it's a Jake or a Tom, and as much as you can, I'm going to see if it's a mature bird that's not going to live much longer, and I'll harvest it and put it in the freezer.
Yeah. Well, and you know, here's the thing: public land hunting is difficult, and I know I kind of switched a little bit. Oscar touched on this, like on our farms, right? We're running. I shit you not, we probably run 100 cameras, right? So so when he says we know each deer, that's true, especially from a buck perspective. Yeah. We've watched these deer grow and mature over the course of 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So we know more about that animal than anybody else does because we've got all that time invested in those animals. And listen, at the end of the day, you're growing this animal in hopes that he gets mature, that he, you know, becomes a shooter quality type animal. But 9 times out of 10, they don't. They never get to be that trophy size, and then we shoot them as mature animals, you know? So it's 1 out of 100 that actually turn out to be those superstars, like, you know, Poseidon and some of those other deer. You know, so, and it's hard to pass deer, right? So as a landowner, you want to go out there and you've put all this time and money in, like like there's a 2-year-old that's giant. I'd love to shoot that thing. Like, but he's 2. He's not, you know,
he's contributing to the herd.
Yeah. Give him time. And that's the thing. Yeah. Yeah. And then on public land, it's hard to do that though. It's hard because you don't have the ability to watch these animals grow. You know, you've got and limited opportunity too. So I know my heart goes out to public land hunters, especially.
Can't imagine.
It's so hard, right? And I like you've got the hunting public guys, and I love what they do, and they're really successful at it. They are certainly not looking for Boone and Crockett animals out there. They're looking to notch a tag and put the meat in the freezer.
Yeah, they just want to harvest something, like bring the meat home. And I'm sure you guys watching these deer, you're recognizing, like, you can also recognize their faces, you can recognize their antlers, their patterns, like, you know which deer is which deer.
Yeah, they'll all normally. I mean, sometimes it's hard to tell, but for the most part, they've got a, there may be a notch in the ear, or there's something that's got, a little white patch over here. There's always something as these deer grow that you're going to be able to spot that deer. Especially during the rut, they'll often get injured fighting during the rut when they're younger, especially get pushed around, so they're likely to have scars and other things, which you can really see. But I want to tell you a story a little bit about that, if you don't mind. We had an incident, not this past year, but the year before. Emmett Sumner was in camp, and we had several shooter caliber deer in camp, and we had them on camera, and I hunted with Emmett, and Emmett was, I don't know, he was 16ish, 17 then, something like that. And through his career, already been a very successful hunter. But I decided I was going to hunt Emmett, and I knew where the deer were coming in. I knew what time they were going to be there. And this kid made a decision that, like, I was just so proud of. So we had a 2-year-old come in that I think was hit by a car because the bottom of its jaw had been damaged, and it was literally hanging off. Like it couldn't close its mouth.
How's he supposed to eat properly?
Yeah. So, I looked over at Emmett, and so I spotted the deer first, and I'm like, don't move. There's a buck coming he's coming down the logging trail. And I said, just be patient. And then there was a big thatched thick area that he was going to have to walk through to get there. I said, now you can go ahead and get up and get ready. And then he popped his head out, and I'm like, I'm sorry, bud, that's a 2-year-old, maybe a 3-year-old. That's not a shooter. And he's like, you need to look at it again. Look at his jaw. And I got back in the binos and looked, and I'm like, buddy, it's your call. It's your deer tag. I said, but he's like, absolutely. We need to take that deer out right now because it won't make it. That's a 16-year-old kid doing that. Like,
for him. Yeah.
That's a $600 tag.
Yep.
You get one a year in Kentucky. He was willing to hang a $600 tag on a deer to do the right thing and put it out of its misery at 16. That's
100%. Because that poor thing would have suffered, starved, died. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like for me, I had a tag in my pocket. If Emmett would have said no to it, I would have absolutely hand me the rifle. I'm taking it out, kind of thing. But I never even got to there. Like he just no, that's the right thing to do, and it's good parenting, and good upbringing, and everything else. But those are the kind of stories people need to hear, right? Not the bloodthirsty stuff and that's the kind of stories I want to get out there, and I'd like to share with people the good stuff, and especially from a young kid like that too. It's easy to watch all these, whitetail shows on TV and say, man, I'm in Kentucky. I know you got some 180s walking around here, and then, shoot a 120 inch caliber animal because he was injured and he needed to get out. Yeah, it was cool. So, all right, I'll move on from there. Sorry, that was just the one little play.
No, I love that. I think that's so important for people to hear because so many people just don't understand. Like, we do care. Something that's possibly injured, something that's going to die a terrible death, in a quick, honorable, ethical death. No, that's really important for sure. So what else do you guys think that, I don't want to say anti-trophy hunters, but like anti-hunters or people that don't quite understand the concept need to know?
Man, that's a tough one.
There's so much, and we've gone over so much already.
Yeah, the problem with, and I think we might have touched on this before, not in this podcast, but in a separate podcast. To me, there's 3 types of individuals. There's a hunter, there's a non-hunter, and there's an anti-hunter. Yes. The difference between a hunter and a non-hunter is that I think at some point in a non-hunter's life, they either weren't given the decision, or it wasn't made available to them, or for whatever reason chose not to become a hunter. And that's fine. I have no problem with it. They don't dislike hunters, or they're not antis by any stretch. They made a decision or something happened that they don't want to participate in the sport, but they have no problem with other people hunting. Now the anti-hunter, that's something totally different. And I can't rack my brain around it. I just don't understand what fuels those people, even when there's so much science, and good science too, that shows, what hunting and what ethical and what it brings to the species alone. It helps species thrive. We're the best managers, right, of these species. And we know this now because, like I said, once again, we've interfered. So it's our job to do this. And you can't, there's this thought pattern that, well, we should just ban hunting altogether, right? And the animals will thrive and everything will be fine. Well, Google Kenya. Okay, so Kenya back in 1975-ish, something like that.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
I'll have to look it up for you. But so Kenya, what country in Africa, right? They banned hunting entirely. I remember stories of people, Robert Rourke, for example, going to Kenya and hunting in his books. And then you've got, what is it, Wilbur Smith, and talks a lot about Kenya in some of his books. And, Green Hills of Africa, too. You've got people like that. So, and talking about these massive migrations of animals and everything that happened. And so Kenya banned hunting entirely. They've got like an eighth of the population of animals that they did when they banned hunting. So they were worried that there wasn't going to be enough animals. They banned hunting, and now there's even less because now poaching is rampant. The farmers don't care, so they're shooting the animals because they're getting into their crops. These urban centers have expanded. So it's a horrible idea. And it doesn't even make sense on paper. So I don't understand. And there's several, Kenya is one example, but there's several countries that have done that. And it always goes to pot. Yep. It's horrible. And it's, you've already messed with it. It's your responsibility to maintain it. So that's just somebody saying, okay, we screwed with it long enough. Now we're just going to wash our hands of it and let the animals fend for themselves. Well, guess what?
Can't do it.
In a few more years, there won't be anything left in Kenya. Yep. It's going to be done. And people.
Yeah. There's no going back. And I mean, like you guys mentioned earlier, it also keeps these habitats open because otherwise they'd be taken over by farmers or commercial and residential construction, building, people moving into those areas. Hunters are fighting to keep those habitats.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And it's not just hunters too. I mean, there's other people that do, but hunters are a big driving force behind that. I mean, we want, I want the land to be, I want something for my kids and, my grandkids and my great grandkids, and I want them to be involved in the sport. I think, and you asked the question earlier about what drives them. I think a lot of it is a lot of kids nowadays have just never been given the opportunity to be in the outdoors, to hunt, to fish. And I think that's the problem. Parents, it's so easy to let your kids sit in front of the TV playing a video game or, with an iPad or, a cell phone in his hand, rather than it is hard to take them hunting, to take them fishing, to spend time with them. And it's costly to do that too, but you're creating memories and you're helping grow the sport and the tradition over generations. And, 3 generations ago, it wasn't a question, right? We were all going to hunt and fish. That's just how we were raised. And now parents are like, they don't even want to go to a dog park kind of thing. They get freaked out. There's too much grass. Most of these people live in concrete jungles.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so much better for the kids to get out there. They gain a respect for the animal, a better understanding, self-sufficiency. I mean, there's just so many benefits built into that. Now, I feel like earlier you had mentioned, I don't know if I wish I had wrote it down. It was a law or a regulation, perhaps?
Yeah, so it's the U.S. It was 1937. It's the Pittman-Robertson Act, and what it did was it put an excise tax on firearms, ammunition, and archery gear. So to date, and I think it was the last year, so this number is going to vary a little bit. That tax has generated over $16 billion, all of which goes to state wildlife agencies. Yep. That money funds habitat restoration, public land access, wildlife research, hunter education, game and non-game species recovery programs. And, without hunters, that program wouldn't exist, right? It's our dollars, based on an excise tax from 1937 that's still funding all this stuff. It's crazy. Like somebody had the foresight back in 1937 to say, hey, we need to do this because eventually this is going to become an issue. And they did, and it generates billions. And we've grown up with it. All of us have. Mm-hmm. You don't even notice it when you buy a rifle or you buy ammunition. You don't even realize it's there in the States. We go buy a bow or arrows or whatever, and it's already included in there. So you're used to it. And it's just crazy. I mean, and it works too.
And that's a wild amount of money to be going in. I mean, if they got rid of that, I'm sure there would be detrimental effects to that. I mean, that's just a lot of funding.
Yeah, and like I said, I like the idea of conserving these big national parks and areas that will always remain that way. However, I don't think you can't. I don't want people to be limited from going and enjoying those places, though, right? So if you're setting those places aside, make it open to the public, let everybody enjoy it kind of thing. And that's the thing. So for me, it's about, when we do those things and we have conservation easements and we turn it over to the governments and the government's creating, new national parks and stuff like that, so long as it stays open to the public and it's accessible, I have no problem with it whatsoever. But there are sometimes, I think I'll use South Florida Water Management, for example. in South Florida, they manage. So we have huge water problems here. Obviously, we're down south, and we get hurricanes and storms, and we have huge flooding problems, and we have huge wastewater problems. So there's these what they're called STA programs now, where they go in and they're stormwater treatment something, SCA
treatment plants.
So where there are these giant swaths of land, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 acres, and they're using the land to clean the water before it gets into Lake Okeechobee, before it goes down to the Everglades, before it eventually spills out into the Gulf of America. And I had to. I couldn't help it.
I love it.
So, but the problem with it is like it is perfect like for waterfowl hunting and everything else, but a lot of those places are off limits to hunting. Now they're open for recreational use, so you can ride your bike around or you can trail, but you can't hunt. And I think you're doing a disservice to the community if you would allow people or charge them a tag, right? Say, hey, you want to hunt this STA, that's fine. There's a $500 license fee a year involved to be able to hunt it, and we're only going to give out 20 for this one and 20 for that one kind of thing. They'd sell out instantly every single year. And that's, I think, a better use of the land. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm sure there's a biologist or some ecologist somewhere that says, oh, we can't do it for this reason or that reason. I'm calling bullshit, and I've not even seen the science behind it.
No, I hear you for sure. So in Canada, hunters, gun owners, we are just like going through it between land restrictions, firearm prohibitions. Last time we spoke, or after the last time we spoke, we had a new prohibition through, like just madness. Are there any regulations or challenges that hunters and gun owners in the States are facing right now? Or is it a little bit more firearm friendly that you guys have a new government?
I mean, it's not, we don't have nearly the problems you do, put it that way.
Gosh.
So for us, there's always growing pressure from both legislation and public perception, right, regarding hunting and firearms. So, and I'm going to say there's efforts in some states to restrict hunting methods and also to limit public land access too, or ban the import of legally hunted trophies. For example, they're trying to do that. And they're trying to ban the importation of like a white-tailed deer. If it was harvested in Kentucky, it can't be transported to Georgia, for example, kind of thing. Okay. And then, so with that going on, and then on the firearm side, right, there's the constant debate around gun control, and it often lumps, law-abiding hunters and sportsmen with criminals. And that couldn't be further. And you and I have talked about this before. Most of us follow the law. We store firearms responsibly and use them for hunting and sporting purposes, not violence. And I want to make that clear, folks. We are not the ones committing these crimes. Law-abiding, gun-owning hunters and huntswomen do not do this, right? And that's the problem. But there's been this cultural shift over, I don't know, the last 20 plus years where fewer young people, like I said, are getting into hunting, and there's so much misinformation and it spreads like wildfire online, right? So that's why it's so important for us, and especially like we asked you, I think, a very similar question, to speak up and educate and show the positive impacts of proper firearms use and ethical hunting principles, because it's our job to grow that next generation and teach them ahead of time.
Yeah, 100%. And I think because we get lumped in with the criminals, on both sides of the border, we go above and beyond to try and show people, listen, we're responsible, we're safe, we need to get more people into the sport or way of life. Yeah, there needs to be more exposure and education, and it's unfortunate that some governing bodies and mainstream media seem to be trying to push that.
Yeah, and that's a problem, right? And that's a legitimate thing. There's the mainstream media, and thankfully we have a new government now, and I think a lot of that's being exposed as to what's going on. But it's a select few people, right, that control what the media puts out, that essentially they push this BS on the rest of everybody, right? So that's their agenda, and for whatever reason they believe it, and they push it out and they mandate it, and it's not true though. That's the thing. I mean, you're not going to stop, and we hate it. The idea of mass shootings or any shooting, I hate the idea. Every hunter does, every responsible gun owner does. We don't want to see that happen. But once again, it's not the responsible gun owners that are committing these crimes, and people don't understand that. Banning firearms, and you're much closer to it than we are. Y'all are going through it right now. That's not the answer. And I can tell you, especially from, and I'm not going to speak for everybody. I will speak for me in this, because it's going to get this is where I get in trouble. If you tell me I can't have my own firearms, if I don't have the firearms needed to protect my family, I'm going to tell you to fuck off, and you and I are going to have a big problem, and I am not giving up those guns. Period. I'm not going to do it. We are afforded opportunities under the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States right to maintain and bear arms, and I will do it until my very last breath. Period. We got ourselves out of a situation from another country in the English, right? Mm-hmm. They colonized, and we got away from English rule because we were able to come together and fight for something that's right. And our founding fathers, all those hundreds of years ago now, knew the importance of maintaining a strong militia and for every citizen to have the right to bear firearms. And yes, I get it. The argument's going to be, well, they didn't mean, AR-15s. Well, of course they didn't mean AR-15s. They did. Obviously, they had no idea that was coming. The however is, you can't just group everything in the same category. They've already banned all that shit in Canada. And with that
100% modern rifles, modern hunting rifles. I mean, back in the day, cars went 30 or 40 miles an hour. It's wild.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And I don't understand it. Like I said, till my last dying breath, I will fight for gun rights for all of us. I believe we're all afforded that opportunity. And I hate it, though, because there are bad people that do bad shit. These school shootings, and we talked about mental health a little bit. That's such a huge thing. And I don't know what the answer is, though. Yeah. How do you fix it, right? And I think, though, to be perfectly honest with you, especially when you see these kids that are committing school shootings and they're getting the firearms from their parents, if that kid that's not of legal age to own that weapon obtains a firearm from your parents, the parents should be responsible. Yeah. Yep. That's, my kids grow up, they know gun safety. They absolutely do. I'm going to expose it to them. They're just not going to magically find a 357 one day in a sock drawer and say, oh, what's this? Let's play with it. Boom. That's never going to happen. And if you start them young, they're going to grow up understanding it and understanding that firearm can hurt you. It can. But once again, it's not, people like to buy, they always blame the firearms, right? That's why they want to ban them. It's not, the firearms aren't killing people. People are killing people. That's
it. That's parents dropping the ball. That's something else is going on. If that gun didn't exist, the kid's going to find some other way to cause damage, to do damage. And yeah, it's hard to say exactly what the solution is to prevent these shootings, but the solution is not. And they're focusing on the entirely wrong people.
Yeah. And it's going to, and fortunately for us, like I said, at least for the next 4 years, I feel like we're in a pretty good spot. But there was a time not very long ago, right, where I was having conversations with people and they were thinking hey, how close are we to civil war in the U.S.? That was a legit conversation.
Yeah. Yep. It seems to be happening here. Tomorrow, this is going to be before this podcast comes out. Hopefully we're going to have an election called, but the current government we have is so focused on lawful gun owners that the resources are taken away from law enforcement, youth programs, criminal, that the crime has just run rampant here. We have people in inner cities asking how they can obtain firearms to protect themselves, and to tell them, the government that you guys voted for doesn't allow that.
Your bullshit buyback program too. That's now, they put X number of dollars in there and that's already spent. So where the hell are they coming up with the money to fund that stupid shit?
I know.
Sorry. I didn't know if we were allowed to cuss on your podcast or not. You can beep it out. No. Yeah. It's just, like I said, it's ridiculous. So I don't know what the answer is, but once again, we know banning firearms is not the solution to it.
No. Criminal
all for gun restrictions. However, and do it via training. I get maybe that's the thing. As kids, we grew up. I did hunter safety education in school. It was part of curriculum growing up in the southeast portion of the United States. So we actually did it in school. And maybe that's an option. Hey, let's bring this back and let's give these kids an option if they want to participate in this and acclimate them to this kind of thing.
Yeah, I do think that is another very component that we've completely lost. I mean, that used to be in Canada, it doesn't anymore. I think they need to bring it back for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, not anymore, but I mean, they were school districts banning the Pledge of Allegiance and banning praying in class and banning this and that. I'm like, are you guys out banning books that have been longstanding? Just stupid stuff. I'm like, come on, guys. Like, that's not the problem. That book doesn't harm anybody.
It's almost like it's intended to enrage and divide people.
Well, that's exactly what it is. And then, fortunately, I don't think we're going to have to deal with it for a while. There's always going to be that element there. In another 4 years for us, it's going to be different. Hopefully your election goes the way you guys want it to. I haven't seen any. I wasn't happy when I saw the polling numbers, though, because it
so scary right now. Yeah, it's looking good. It's not looking as promising as it was a couple of months ago.
Well, yeah, and I think you're right. I think if Trudeau would have just stayed in there and not announced, I think you probably would have had a shift in government. Now, since our conversation, right, since we got on your podcast or vice versa, you're on ours, and I've actually become more interested in Canadian politics, so much so that my girlfriend at night, because I've been on YouTube so much, when we sit down at night, it like pops up, and now Trudeau's on TV every night, or this asshole or that. And there's a lot of people from the States that really have good channels devoted to what's going to Canada's politics. So yeah. So I've actually, between that and South Africa, like I'm up to speed on politics now. What's going on there? And she hates it. She can watch 15 minutes of it, and it's like, can we at least watch hunting or something?
Yeah, I hear it. It's exhausting. Like I have to pay attention to it. I'm living in it. Like it's a big part of my job. But holy, watching what's going on in this country, like scary.
Right.
Damn. Well, before we close off, is there anything else you guys think people need to know?
My biggest thing is, like I said, there's a huge misconception, and it's the term trophy hunter, and that's the problem. We all get looped into that, or grouped into that same category. I mean, what do you think? I mean,
specifically the trophy hunter aspect of it. Yeah, I'm always like, there's always bad actors. Like it's never like no one ever sees me wake up at 3:30 in the morning to go freeze my ass off in a tree.
Right.
for 7 hours.
Right. Exactly.
On there, like you don't see that. Like you see the guy that on there that shot the elephant, and stuff like that from the back of a truck or something.
Well, and we're going to get comments. They're going to be like, look at these two assholes in South Florida, right? Look at these two giant deer, these trophies behind them. And you know what, guys, these are replicas. These deer are still alive, by the way.
Yeah.
So, I didn't know that.
Months ago.
Yeah, these deer are still alive. They're just replicas. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And while, yes, I do have shoulder mounts and I've got wall pedestal mounts of trophies, I absolutely do. But don't point the finger and say, oh, look, no, these are representations of an animal that is still alive to this day that you can walk out there and see.
That's impressive.
Yeah, which makes it even more cool, I think. That deer is still living and bigger, too. These deer are actually much bigger now than they were on these ones.
Those are, that's amazing.
Yeah, they're toads. But yeah, I don't know. But what do you?
No. And I feel like from the conversation we had, anybody that, commented on any of my posts saying, I'm okay with hunting, but not trophy hunting, can easily watch this and just go away with a better point of view, perspective, better education, better understanding. I think the main concern was that these animals are just going to waste. People are just going and killing for fun.
Yeah, I'll say something that's going to be a little controversial in that I hate the term trophy hunting, right? So we've got that out of the way. Yeah. There's a difference between a hunter and a trophy hunter. I will say this, and it's going to piss some people off. A trophy hunter still has value, though. And I'll say that because they are normally the ones that are paying way over market value for these animals that are of that trophy caliber. And guess what? That money still goes back into conservation. It goes back into these programs that meet, even though he may not take it on his private jet when he leaves, it's feeding families right there. So yes, while I don't agree with it because it's being done for the wrong reasons, or at least inherently for me, they're the wrong reasons, I still, I have to be in support of that guy that's doing that, because I'm not going to be able to sit here and say, I support all legal types of hunting and by any means that are legal, and then trash this guy for doing it. I can't. I'm either going to support hunting or I'm not going to. So unfortunately, there's, like I said, it's a very small group of people that do it, but they do contribute. And I think but it paints the rest of us with a bad image is the problem.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like the main concern was people just seeing people that are legit trophy hunters taking these pictures and just imagining that these animals are, rotting away wherever they lay.
Yeah, and that's
I don't think people kind of understand like the value of like you said, of trophy hunters. Like I think they just like that. Is it Arizona desert bighorn tag?
What, for 2 million or something stupid,
1.3
million. Yeah, something like that.
So big box.
Expensive ever sold, and it's because somebody somewhere, some farmer has figured out where this is going to be new world record sheep lives.
200-inch sheep.
Yeah, something crazy, and somebody was willing to pay for it, and they bought it at, was it at the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation? No, it was the Sheep Foundation.
Yeah, Sheep Foundation.
Yeah, but it was like 1.3 million or something they spent on a single tag just to be able to go. There's no guarantee with that. That just allows you to go hunt this animal, kind of thing. Right. So yeah, I mean, and look how much money that organization raised.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if that guy, okay, let's say he does go out there, right, and he shoots that animal, and they pack out the hide, the cape, what we call it, a cape, and the skull and the horns, and leaves the rest of it there. Well, you know what? There's still predator animals and everything else that are going to eat that animal. It's not totally going the way. So the argument could be made. Now, I still don't like it, but at the same time, for $1.3 million for one animal, that paid for a shitload of conservation right there. How many animals did he just protect by that check he just cut, regardless of a trigger squeeze? He did that without even squeezing the trigger on just a chance to hunt an animal. Yeah. So like it or not, there's value there. And like I said, unfortunately, if you're going to defend hunting, you're going to have to defend all legal types of hunting. And, those people are out there. And like I say, they contribute. Now, go back again. I don't like it. I don't think you like it. We're not that guy.
Yeah.
But it's hard to argue with. I've never spent 1 point anything million in my career, on hunting, much less on the opportunity to possibly hunt an animal.
Yeah, exactly. I just think it's a very easy thing to paint people as like trophy hunters. Kind of like that's just like a thing that you like call somebody like, oh, that guy's a trophy hunter. Like as like a negative kind of way to show people that like, oh, that guy's just a trophy hunter.
Yeah, it has a negative connotation to it
and everything. But like that's the thing. Like all trophy hunters are hunters, and then all hunters are also trophy hunters.
Yeah,
on there because like. For me, like 100-inch white-tailed deer in Florida, that's a trophy.
Right, that's your idea of a trophy
for me.
Yeah,
look at your wall.
If you're
on there, exactly.
If you're in Fort Gaines, Georgia, you get into that mid 120 areas, and you've just killed a stunner of a buck. But you get into Kentucky, and that number turns into 180, and then if you get into Ohio, that's closer to 200. So, but for each his own, right?
Yeah.
That guy, I've never killed anything bigger than 140-inch whitetail. So guess what? When I see one, that's a trophy caliber animal to me.
I think. What people always recognize as like trophy hunters is the kind of like the old school, like the buffalo hunters of like the early Americas kind of thing. Like the people that were going and just mowing down swaths of animals and kind of stuff, like just like, oh yeah, this thing was, this rare, giraffe was killed, and for this kind of thing. And, look how terrible this person is, and I'm just like, like that's just a piece of shit person.
Yeah. Well, and listen, every couple of years something happens, right? Just a few years ago, it was Cecil the lion.
Yeah.
When the lion was killed, right? So that was a known lion. Like this lion had his own website kind of thing, and he lived on a national park. And anyway, but there's no fences there, right? So they're free to roam. And he moved off of this big national park into a hunting concession that was licensed to do so. The hunter that shot him was a doctor that had a hunting license, and they had no idea. Lion is a lion, a lion. They don't know shit about some Cecil the lion that's got his website. The PH, the outfitter, everybody were involved. Everything was 100% legal. He shoots this lion, and it turns out it was this famous Cecil the lion that everybody comes to see all the time. this guy got like, he was ruined. Like they just, it was so like forever. I think he was a dentist or something, but like he was gone. Like they ruined him, and like it almost ruined the entire safari industry because of one incident like that. And like the guy didn't do anything wrong. That lion was hunted legally.
Yeah.
That is not that's not a caged animal. You didn't walk in there. That's, I mean, so that guy, I don't remember what his name is though. He probably changed it by now, but that poor bastard got hung out to dry.
Yeah, I don't remember. But stories like that are the ones that blow up. It's not going to be the story of the 16-year-old out hunting the deer with broken jaw. Like that's not, no one's going to hear about that. People are always going to hear about things that can be turned into a negative.
Yeah, it's like the duck thing, the chick with the duck thing. And when we get off, I'll have Jenny will send that to me, and I'll send it over to you. Because somebody reposted, so all the original links have been taken down now, but somebody like screenshot or actually screen recorded it, and then we can get it. But I'll show it to you, and like it'll just piss you off by looking at it and think, what the hell are people doing? You know, so it's Cecil one year, it's this duck chick the next year. It's always something. They're going to find that one thing to blow up and hang their hat on, and unfortunately, but yeah.
That's all you're going to hear about.
Yeah, I'm always like, it's never trophy hunters or hunters. I'm just like, yeah, that's just a piece of shit person on there. Like the duck thing, like anytime you kind of see like any kind of like, taking bad shots and that kind of stuff, I'm just like, that's just a person that has no respect for them.
Yep, they exist in every industry. They exist in every activity that you're going to see. Like there's piece of shit teachers. I mean, it's everything.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
I don't know. Hunters just get the short end of the stick there.
Well, and if we'd stop fucking fighting amongst ourselves too, help. That's the problem. I don't know if you guys have that problem in Canada, but we have that problem here.
Yeah, public versus private, certain species versus species, gun owners. I mean, there's sporting rights guys.
Hunters, it's private versus public. It's all that. Who gives a shit? Does it matter? It's the crossbow guys versus the traditional guys, and it's all. It doesn't matter. We're all hunters. We're all contributing to the sport by whatever legal means necessary. I don't give a shit, and I wasn't that way. That's the problem. 20 years ago, I was that guy that was trashing people because I thought they weren't. They had an unfair advantage because they were using a crossbow and I had to use a bow. Well, no, it is what it is. I mean, that's life. They're hunting. They're contributing to the sport. That's what it is. Stop fighting. Stop shaming people on social media. Stop, somebody shoots a great buck. Oh, what high fence place did you get him off of? Just people just out there to be assholes rather than, listen, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. You don't have to comment, right? You don't have to. You don't have to be that guy, and when somebody does something, congratulate him. If you can't congratulate him for whatever moral high ground you're standing on, then don't say shit. How about that?
That's it. I mean, when the rest of the world is coming at us, like, put your blinders on. If you don't agree 100%, tough fucking shit, you're not going to.
Well, and it's like, but then I do draw the line. Like, I can't go to bat for this chick with the duck thing. There's no way. No, there's no coming to her rescue. Like, there's no white knight that's going to, swoop in on a horse at the end of the day and save her ass. She's screwed. Like, you
for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, if we could stop infighting, I think that would go a long way to help this. If we had a united front, it would it's so much easier to fight misrepresentation, to fight the media, everything. If we're united and think about how many millions of hunters there are in the U.S. alone.
Yeah.
I mean, the whitetail, I don't know, there was some stat that came out. I don't know how many million, like whitetail is the most hunted species in the world by far. Mm-hmm. And it's, American hunters by far, the vast majority of those hunters. We're several million hunters that just hunt whitetail alone. And there's probably, millions that hunt waterfowl, and there's some that cross over and do all kind of stuff. If all these people come together, that's a bunch of damn people and a lot of damn money and a bunch of mouths that can go and influence the right kind of people to make legislation and put legislation in place that protects us.
Yep, 100%. It's the same on the gun side here. Like, people just need to come together, differences aside, and focus on what really matters. But before we close out, I'm going to put all of the links as to where to find you guys down below. But people find you guys. You guys are everywhere.
Yeah, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We're so this weekend we're starting the uploads for Spotify for the podcast and for Apple Music. And then the TV show is going to come out shortly. So yeah, we're kind of everywhere right now. If you Google Saltlick, you can find us pretty easy. The online store is getting ready to go live. So yeah, we've got lots going on right now. And listen, for everybody watching, we're super thankful for you guys tuning in and watching Jenn. And Jenn, thank you a bunch for inviting us on your show. It was, we had a great conversation the first time around. So we knew before that podcast got over, like, hey, we definitely got to talk to Jenn again. She's right up our alley. No, and I love talking to people, not just about South Africa, but like you're literally our closest neighbor. And I didn't know shit about what you guys were going through. And I mean, it's so cool to see your side of it and see your perspective and vice versa. So
yeah, 100%. I got a lot of conversation and I'm sure everyone listening did too. So I really, really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having us on. And like I said, if you ever need anything, just, or you got an idea for something, let us know. We're always you got some controversial shit, you throw it my way. I'm happy to swing away.
I'd love it. Absolutely.
All right. Well, good luck in the election tonight.
We need it. Thank you guys.
Good luck with turkey season.
Yep. Good luck, Canada.
Yeah.
And and good luck with turkey season.
Just good luck, Canada in general.
Yeah. Exactly.
Good luck, Canada.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. See ya.